Hi, everybody. Welcome to Friends Talk Money. I'm Pam Kruger, co-host of Money Track on public television and founder of wealthramp.com.
I'm Richard Eisenberg, a personal finance writer and editor, and formerly the editor of the Money and Work channels for the PBS site for people over 50, nextavenue.org.
And I'm Terry Savage, nationally syndicated personal finance columnist and the author of The Savage Truth on Money.
We're three friends who like to talk money and all the issues that come with it.
On this podcast, we're trying to help you understand your personal finances
to get you and your retirement on the right path for true financial peace of mind.
Hi, everybody. Usually on Friends Talk Money, we're talking about the money and assets you have and how to manage them. But today we're going to talk about the money and assets you might give away to your adult children and grandchildren, either on your death, as an inheritance, or during the second half of life as gifts. And we're going to talk a little bit about the inheritance that you might one day receive from your parent, because that's important to talk about too. I wrote about all this for Market Watch recently, and I discovered that we're doing inheritances all wrong. And financial advisors are not really helping as much as they could. Before we get into how we're doing inheritances wrong and what we could do to fix things, I want to ask my friends Terry Savage and Pam Kruger about all this. So Terry and Pam, one of the things that I heard over and over again was that too many families don't talk about the topic of inheritances that they hope to bestow. Parents aren't talking with their adult children. Boomers and Gen X aren't talking with their parents about what their parents plan to do. And I'm not talking about how much money. I'm just talking about there is going to be some money, or there isn't going to be some money, or this is what I'm thinking, that sort of stuff. And I guess I wondered, Terry and Pam, what are your thoughts about whether we're having the right conversations about this sort of thing?
Well, I'll start. I think part of it is it's an acknowledgement of your own mortality. And the other part of it is, how will I even know if I have enough money to last my lifetime, much less give it to my children? Why would I tell them now when I'm just really worried about having enough to make it through my life? And finally, it has to do with fairness and equity. And that all has to do with estate planning, which is something people don't want to do. And it's not so much that estate planning for the very wealthy, generation skipping trust. We're not talking about that. We're talking about, my daughter has 2 kids and her husband doesn't make very much money. My son's a tech tycoon. It's not my case. I have 1 child and it made it a lot easier. But, and nobody knows exactly, let's say there is money left over or the house will be left over. What's fair? Should you divide everything equally? These are all things we could talk about today. Or whether it's the one who needs the most and so forth. So there are a lot of emotions bound up. First is facing our own mortality. Second is the need to plan, which nobody wants to do that estate plan. And part of the reason they don't want to do the estate plan is because this question of, well, what if I have something left over, what's the fair way to divide it? So all that contributes to, I'll think about it tomorrow, Scarlett.
Yeah, I mean, you're so right. Equal is not necessarily fair. I think we're going to have a lot of fun kind of pulling out this discussion where we may find that we can banter a little bit around this idea of, I understand what you're saying when you say that somebody shouldn't feel the need when, especially if they're worried about their own running out of money in retirement. Why should I talk to my kids about this? But I'm going to totally push back on that and disagree, not with you, but with that whole notion. I have not one, but I've got at least a handful of friends my age, contemporaries, who are dealing with this right now. They are the adult kids. They do need to find out what mom and dad want to do as they get up there in age. It's not just about money. They've got to know and be able to talk openly with their parents about what's going to happen, the challenges that are coming up, the medical, the healthcare, the what if, and the what if. Now it gets challenging, and I'm never going to forget that on my Money Track show, the series I did, we devoted one entire episode to showing some adult kids who literally were expecting their inheritance from their parents. And they were so sure that they were going to get it, that they were actually living their lives banking on it, which is terrible. Mm-hmm. And they never even discussed it with their parents. So there are a lot of reasons, you guys, in my opinion, why parents, please, should take the initiative and realize that not talking with your kids about these issues might encourage some of them to make some really stupid assumptions, which just invites bigger misunderstandings and problems later.
I think
Good
that's
point.
very true. And we are talking about a lot of money. You know, it's not only about money, but it's something, part of it is about money. It's been called the Great American Wealth Transfer. And I've seen estimates saying that in the next 20 years, anywhere from $17.5 trillion to $68 trillion will get passed down from one generation to the other. And we're not talking about millionaires, just millionaires making the inheritance, although there are some of them. There's a lot of people who are not anywhere close to that, who are going to have some money or some assets, maybe it's real estate, whatever it may be, that they are going to pass down to their children or their grandchildren. I talked to a woman named Laura Varus. She's the chief executive of the Hearts and Wallets financial research firm. They do really great work. And she conducted a really big study about inheritances. And here's what she said.
A lot of wealth managers and a lot of firms, everybody seems to think like inheritances is something for rich people.
But she says inheritance are a mass market thing, and I think she's right. It's especially true when you broaden the definition of inheritance to include passing down your views about money and about doing good, not just how much money, but what do you think about money? What does money mean, and what can it do for people? So I think I'd like us to talk a little bit about the ways we can do inheritances better and how financial advisors can help. So one problem is that parents are not talking enough with their adult children, just like Pam was saying, about the inheritance the kids are going to receive or may receive one day. Hearts and Wallets found that only 54% of people receiving inheritances had discussed them with the donors in advance. So Terry, you talked a little bit about this, but any other thoughts about why parents don't talk with their adult kids about even the possibility of an inheritance? And again, not the specific amounts, but just a broad outline. You know, I'm hoping to be able to do this. I'm thinking this is what I'm going to do. Who knows what's going to happen, but just so they know kind of what's in your head.
Right. I've done this. And in a minute, I'll tell you how I did it because I think it's very important. But I think you asked me about the reasons people don't. First of all, they think you have to be specific about numbers. That's not necessarily true. But for sure, if you're going to, let's assume you're married, which I'm not, but if you're married, you have a spouse and you are each other's successor trustees in your irrevocable living trust. Then you have the choice. Who's the next successor trustee? Or if you're a widow or widower, is it your daughter who's good with money or your son who would be insulted if he's not the executor of your estate or the successor trustee? So the first question involves, I guess, if you have 2 kids or more, picking someone. Okay. Now it's going to happen. One day you're going to be gone. One day someone's got to do this. Maybe one gets your healthcare power of attorney. One is better with business and will handle the business aspects of it. But you, when you work with your attorney, have to make these decisions. And this is the hardest decision, I think, with parents to make who have multiple children. And what if you have 3 children? Does someone get left out, or can you find a role, maybe in charge of the house and distribution of its whatever? Your lawyer, you don't want to spend your lawyer at $500 or $1,000 an hour figuring this out for you. So before you make your estate plan, the first question is not forget the money or whatever's left. What are the roles your adult children will play? When you've got that decided and you started making your estate plan, then you can talk to each of your children. The second question is, okay, tell me when's a good time to have this discussion. Do you have this right after the Thanksgiving turkey when the football games start? You know? When is the good time? Do you call everybody there? Well, the grandchildren have soccer that day. We can't come, and we have a parent-teacher conference on Thursday night, kind of a thing. There's got to be an occasion on which, especially if there are 2 or 3 of them, you get everybody together. Remember, I have that personal financial organizer form. It's free at terrysavage.com, top right-hand corner. You can print out the blank copies. You can actually fill them out online and print them out. Where is my everything, my will, my safe deposit box, the key to my safe deposit box, the life insurance policy. If you print that out and give it to them, print some blanks for them, they should have it themselves for their own life situation. But that might be the way you start the discussion, because it will lead you to all these issues. Where's the cemetery deed? Do I want to be cremated? Do I want to be buried? Don't bury me next to grandpa. I didn't like him. You know, these discussions are not just about money. But then the subject of money comes up, I'll stop there. I promised I'd tell you this.
Yeah.
So my son just turned 50 last month. Okay. And he's in the world of finance. I have one son and twin granddaughters. I respect my son's financial ability hugely. He was always the go-to person. For a long time, it was my attorney, who's also a longtime friend, estate planning attorney. But now it's my son and my attorney, but everybody knows he's going to deal with everything. And I had a meeting of my consigliaries, is probably the word I should use, my accountant, who's been my longtime friend and guru. I have a wonderful financial advisor who's just keeps me on the right track when I get emotional about money, and my estate planning attorney. We all had dinner a year ago when I updated my estate plan. We went over everything, no holds barred. We started in the office of one of them and laid all the stuff, and then we had dinner and talk. And what's a big weight off my mind? Everything's in my drawer. Everybody knows who my IRA beneficiaries are. Friends, some of them who, didn't save enough. And I can't tell you how much better you feel.
Yeah, what a relief. What a relief.
I'll stop there. It's just
relief.
It's just a relief.
What did your son say when he did this? Was he grateful about it?
It's just a sign of mutual respect. I know I didn't think I could ever get there. I mean, my first estate plan I made was when my son was right after my son was born. It never occurred to me that one day, it would be closer to the time he'd need it. Part of that is building a relationship of trust, if you can, with all your kids, at least with some of them.
I like what you said, mutual respect.
Yeah, I think you can only do this with a relaxed soul or heart or whatever when we raise kids who you've taught about money, and who my son's certainly exceeded me in many of the financial markets ways, and who you respect. Yeah. Because you worked all your life. It's not that nobody's going to, I tell myself all the time, so, my carpet doesn't get washed twice a year. Well, I'll be up looking down saying, wash that carpet, No, you won't be. But you think that these are all things that you built up with your own hard work. Nobody gave me anything. No. And so you want to make sure they're taken care of when you're gone. But basically, I think I'm not looking down and going to complain. I just would like to feel better while I'm alive, knowing that they're prepared.
Yeah, right. You did it. You did it. Yeah.
And I also talked to a woman named Suzanne Schmidt. She's the head of financial wellness at New York Life. And she thinks a lot about this. She said having that kind of inheritance talk, the one you were talking about, can really help avoid misunderstanding and even anger, especially if you've got a bunch of family members who are, if you don't have the talk, are going to be maybe fighting or can be confused after you die about what did she mean? What did he mean? Yeah. Why did they do that? Here's what Suzanne Schmidt said.
I think it's an act of love and courage and kindness to have those hard conversations.
Now, part of these conversations can be about just things that you were saying before, Pam, like to Terry, like where all those key documents are, who has them. Pam, I wonder if you can talk a little bit about that side of it.
Yeah, and then I also want to get into a little bit about financial advisors, and because the right financial advisors
for sure
lead the way on this. They don't follow, they're not lagging. On that same Money Track episode that I mentioned, I had Ben Stein. He was on almost every episode. And I asked him, let's talk about how you talk to your parents. Terry talked about, talking to her son. We're talking about talking to your kids. But what if they don't? What if they're just of that mindset in that generation where they just don't want to? So I'll never forget on this episode, oh my God, Ben Stein locked eyes with me and he said, kids should never initiate, I have to talk like him, the conversations about their parents' money or inheritances or anything, period. He said, parents have to bring up the topic. And with all due respect, I agree with the idea that that's the best case scenario. But since then, I had to wrestle with this. Is it never, or is there a time and a place when adult child can and should bring up the inheritance questions or the questions about the future after parents are gone? So I'm going to share what worked out in my own situation. when my parents were alive, and it did work out. It was kind of like the old, hey, so-and-so, our friends, we know them. So-and-so's been diagnosed with early Alzheimer's. And here's what they're doing. And they all got together and got organized ahead of time. And they decided the best way to protect mom and dad and the whole family from running around in chaotic circles is to designate the medical healthcare proxy child, like Terry mentioned, and to have another child who gets brought in, and you start to have that discussion that way. Now, the way I did it with my own parents was I used the old trick of like, oh yeah, my best friend had this problem. Have you ever heard of this before? Is this something you know about? That actually was able to start the conversation much easier with my own family, my own parents, because then I got to say to them, have you ever thought about that? Boy, so especially Richard, with the healthcare proxy and knowing where the documents are and understanding how to get to them when important decisions need to be made and someone is incapacitated or not, or they're cognitively impaired. So, it's finances, it's organization, it's healthcare. So the bigger discussion, I think, can land the adult kid in the zone where it's the safety zone to then money and it starts to come into it, and I think that's how it could begin.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you did that and that you talked about it, because so often, no matter what Ben Stein says, the parents don't want to have that conversation, don't bring it up. And if they wait for their adult kids to, if the adult kids are waiting for that to happen, it may never happen. There's a good chance it will never happen. Or, even worse, the older parents, people in their 80s and 90s, one of them gets dementia, Alzheimer's, and is no longer able to have any kind of a conversation. And by not having that talk when they could have, it's too late. It's just too late. Now, there's a few of the experts I've talked to said there's another mistake many of us are making, and that is that we're thinking about inheritance just about passing down money, when we really should be also talking with our kids and grandkids about money values and priorities and our hopes for them, and hoping that they will carry on those same money priorities, values, or at least to find out what theirs are. There's a woman named Susan Turnbull who runs a company called Personal Legacy Advisors in Manchester, Massachusetts. And she has created these really useful resources for these kinds of talks. She calls them life legacy cards. I saw them, and they have prompts to have conversations about legacies and values. So you basically look at them with your adult child and you bring it up, sort of what this means to me, or what I want you to know, kind of thing. And another thing,
not a drinking game.
Yeah, exactly. Well, kind of, yeah.
I want to keep the emotions.
Too late, baby. If you've waited till your kids are adults, I feel strongly about this, so I'm going to interrupt. Too late. I mean, you should have been as a sidebar along the way. The reason I'm doing this, or the reason I can't be with you, that is because I'm involved in this doing, I think it's really important to give back in this way or another way. I'm not talking about charitable giving. I'm talking about, boy, you should be sharing your values long before you have to discuss them when you're about to leave.
But I think what you're doing right now, both of you are encouraging people who are listening to this podcast to, if they haven't, and I would not necessarily agree that it's too late. I just think that if you have adult kids at any age, they do want to know, if you haven't been talking to them already, about your values, how you feel about money, charity, etc. I just think that it's really encouraging people to go ahead and have that conversation, because your adult kids, they want to know about you more in terms of money, because it's conversation that we don't generally have at home. Terry's house is different. Terry,
yeah. She's talking about money when the kids are 7.
Experts, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And another mistake that I want to mention is waiting to pass down money only after we die. My feeling is, if you can, and not everybody can, but if you can, why not try to give your adult kids some money while you're alive, when you can see that they can really use the help to pay for college for their kids, your grandkids, or to pay bills, or to save for retirement. Terry, I wonder if you have any thoughts about this. We did an episode recently about how grandparents can put money into 529 college savings funds for the grandkids. That's one way of doing it. But any other thoughts about that? And
There
maybe
are,
and the
I had
inherited
an
IRA
epiphany.
rule.
I had an epiphany maybe about 8 or 9 years ago. I was talking to a very wealthy woman. I mean, mega wealth. And she was talking about, I mean, she was dividing lots of money up and making gifts because of the estate tax laws now. And I said, well, I'm just going to save it all. And I hope I'll be up in heaven looking at my son's face when he sees what the amount is. Now, he always knew that he had responsibilities, but I hope to shock him. And she said, Terry, that's so not the right way to look at it. I mean, she really opened my eyes. And again, she was distributing wealth. You know, we were talking about estate planning, and she was talking about her distributions. And she really turned my head around about that, about the importance, not of controlling, but of doing some good and getting to enjoy the good that you're gifting, or you're doing something special.
Right.
That's another joy. I have to say that if you have always thought, well, they'll find out soon enough when I'm gone, they'll be surprised, you know, that'll be good for them. If you've had that thought, Richard, I'm glad you brought that up, because I want you to rethink that. I'm not talking about distributing everything and then not having enough to pay for your nursing care. That's not what I'm talking about.
Right.
I'm talking about, yeah, you can be generous. It may not be that they need it, but that the act of coming up with a surprise piece of generosity gives you a lot of thrill too.
Yeah, I mean, let's bring in the financial advisor part right now, real quick, if that's okay.
Sure.
This is the whole role. If you have the right fiduciary fee only advisor who's not in a hurry to sell you something, because they don't sell it. They are looking at the whole picture. So it's the time to figure out, I want to make sure that I'm going to have enough money to last the rest of my life. But I so want to be able to give $17,000 away, you know, a year, which I can as a gift to my kids. Don't know if I can afford to do the 529. Oh dear. Now, we want the parents to, you know, obviously initiate that. We've talked about that, but this is where the advisor comes in and breaks the ice, because the advisor's role is to look at the whole picture and then be very proactive. And that advisor is the one who brings up the elephants in the room, because that's the advisor's job, is to pull it all together and say, okay, with the financial planning, do we want to do the given while we're living? And if so, what does that look like? Let me help you model that out and project your cash flow. If you decide to fund these 529 plans or give that $17,000 away each year, that's where an advisor can really help, because the advisor is also going to say, let's make sure we look at your estate planning documents. Let's make sure we've got a healthcare proxy. Let's make sure of this and that, and trusted contacts, and on and on. So yes, it's true. The majority of financial advisors who live and breathe are salespeople, and they may not even know about this. But there are fee-only fiduciary advisors, and this is their whole world. This is their wheelhouse: holistic financial planning and investing. So
time for, I mean, I say this all the time. You'll find it all over my website at terrysavage.com. It's in the top right next to the box. It says personal financial organizer. We'll put a link to that in our show notes. Is find your trusted financial advisor. It's a link to my story about Pam and what she's doing at wealthramp.com, which is connecting people, match.com, I call it, for fee-only fiduciary financial advisors. Let Pam do the matching. She actually is very hands-on about that. But this is, you're so right. Your financial advisor is not the person that tells you you should have so much in bonds or so much in stocks, or whether you're too concentrated in tech. That's a small part of it. Your fee-only financial advisor is talking about, you know what? Go ahead and put the money in the 529. You're going to be fine. Look at how we've organized your income.
here's why, and
You're
here's
fine. And so you do it. And that's, boy, there's no price for peace of mind. And that's what a good financial advisor gives you. I rely on my own because things go on in your head when you go, well, what if? And making calm decisions with good help is critical.
I agree. I agree with you both wholeheartedly, but I will echo what Pam said, that there are a lot of financial advisors who don't see the world that way. They see the world as assets under management and how much do they have and is it growing. And when I talked to the people I did for my inheritance article, they said it's very rare to find the financial advisor who will have a meeting with the client and the client's adult children, or the client and the client's parents, or all of them together to talk about these things. It happens, but not that often.
It's part of my vetting.
Right.
Yeah.
The last thing I just want to mention, one final inheritance mistake I wanted to bring up, is a lot of parents and advisors are not doing enough to help the adult kids know how to manage any inheritance that they may get one day. So I mentioned New York Life before. They did a survey. They found that only 42% of millennials and only 31% of Gen Zs said that they would feel very comfortable financially handling an inheritance that they got.
And typically the younger the person, the less real life experience they've had, the less likely in many cases they have navigated the situation.
So I guess I'll go to you, Terry and Pam, and ask, do you have any thoughts on how parents can help prepare their adult kids to be able to manage the inheritances that they may get one day, no matter how much they are, but just so they aren't flummoxed entirely when suddenly they find there's some money that they've got to be in charge of?
It doesn't start when you're 70 and they're 50. It starts at a much younger age. And you talk about those things. You may start with, honey, I don't know if there's anything left over, but it's really important that you meet with Joe, who's my stockbroker, or Sam or Susan, who's my financial planner. And they get involved in the process early. It's never too late. But the best thing you can do, I think, is to get you must have trusted advisors. I can't tell you how many posts on my blog or emails. Well, my husband died and it was always at XYZ firm, and I don't know about this guy. Okay, we're going to set you up at Wealth Ramp. We're going to find you a fee-only fiduciary financial advisor. That's the exact moment when you get going, you bring in your children immediately after that, because you're not taking it with you. There's no bank vaults buried in your burial vault. You're leaving things behind. You're leaving values behind. You're leaving assets behind.
Yeah.
And part of your responsibility is to introduce your children to the people you trust.
Yeah. It's such a good point that she brings up. And again, there's just so much resistance because it's all about the parents, discussing this with their child, hopefully at an earlier age, and kind of making sure that they're comfortable and that, they understand, hopefully you've had conversations throughout your child's life about what they're doing with their money and how they're handling it. Their weaknesses and their strengths. But there are a lot of reasons to talk about what kids might inherit, what might happen with you, where the wills are, where the will is, where the trusts are, what all of these things, and do it together, as a family. And hopefully, look, if you ignite some family squabbles around the Thanksgiving dinner, so what, because I have a message for parents, because I'm seeing it right now with my own friends who are inheriting, and the siblings it's a mess. It's a mess. Some of them have nothing to do with a lot of money. It's to do with the vase, mom's vase, so here's my message to parents. We've seen this movie before lots of times. The kids are not going to work it out later if they're left to interpret your intentions. If you make them assume, you're going to end up with kids who may be fighting for the rest of their lives, because I'm seeing it right now.
Amen.
Well, I hope that Terry, Pam, and I have been able to help avoid some of these problems for our audience and get you all thinking a little bit about what you can be doing now with your kids, with your parents, just on your own, to avoid these kinds of problems and help everybody be a little happier. Thanks so much for joining us today on Friends Talk Money. See you soon.
Friends Talk Money is funded in part by a grant from the Investor Protection Trust. The IPT is a nonprofit organization devoted to investor education. Since 1993, the IPT has worked with the states to provide the independent, objective investor education needed by all Americans to make informed investment decisions. Visit investorprotection.org. We also receive support from the North American Securities Administrators Association, known as NASA. It's the oldest international investor protection organization. NASA's members include state and provincial securities regulators from the U.S., Canada, and Mexico who serve on the front lines of investor protection. Recognizing that education and awareness are powerful tools in the fight against investment fraud, NASA is pleased to sponsor Friends Talk Money. Here are 3 important tips to help you protect your money from fraud. With investing, there are always risks, so be cautious of anybody telling you that a certain investment is guaranteed. You should also proceed with caution if somebody is promising very large investment returns. This is a common red flag for investment fraud. Last and most importantly, be sure you're working with a licensed or registered financial professional. You can check your advisor and make sure they're licensed by visiting brokercheck.finra.org. NASA is your partner in keeping you safe and helping you avoid investment frauds. Visit nasa.org and click on the Investor Education tab to learn more.